Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from. Welcome to our online application tips panel. We are joining you live from Evans Hall at the Yale School of Management in New Haven, Connecticut. My name is Laurel Grodman. I'm Director of Admissions for the full-time MBA program at the Yale School of Management. I'm also a proud graduate of Yale SOM, class of 2006. So I'm so happy to have the opportunity today to talk to you a little bit about the school and our application process. I'm also fortunate to be joined by a number of my colleagues today, and I'm going to have them just briefly introduce themselves before we get started.
Hi, my name is Jolene Monson, and I am the Deputy Director of Admissions Operations.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Maria Terlipanska, and I'm a Senior Associate Director of Admissions.
Hi, my name is Kate Patello. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Melville, and I'm the Director of Financial Aid here at Yale SOM.
Great, thanks everyone. So just to give you a sense of how the next hour or so will proceed, I'll kick things off with a brief overview of the school, our program, our community, and then we'll move into the application portion where my colleagues will speak a little bit more about the individual components of the application. Then we'll open it up for Q&A. You can use the Q&A feature within our platform, and Kristen Mercury, another member of our team, will be fielding those questions behind the scenes and sending them my way. As you think about the questions that you might want to ask, do try to keep them broad and generally applicable. If you do have individual questions about your personal application, you can always email us at mba.admissions@yale.edu, and we'd be happy to talk with you then. So we will kick things off with our mission, because I think that's always the best way to get started in talking about our school here at the Yale School of Management. So our mission is to educate leaders for business and society. And our mission means that we aim to develop leaders who can think broadly about the challenges we face in an increasingly complex world, and with the ability to be decision makers in environments that call for multiple stakeholders, influencers, and consequences. This is the founding mission of our school, but we believe the mission has never been more relevant than it is today. So as a school, we have developed 3 key strategic objectives that help us put that mission into practice in very real ways. And those are to be the business school most integrated with its home university, to be the most distinctively global U.S. business school, and to be recognized as the best source of elevated leaders for all sectors and regions. So I'll spend the next couple of minutes talking about each one of those objectives, how they benefit you as a student, and I will try to link them back to our application process as well and how we think about them in that context. So the first, to be the business school most integrated with its home university. As a member of the Yale SOM community, you truly are a member of the broader Yale University community and all the opportunities and privileges that come with that. And when I think about concrete ways in which that plays out, one of my favorite examples there is in the second year of your experience here, where you will take entirely elective courses. Those electives can be taken in any classroom, in any quantity throughout the entire university. So if you have an interest in learning Mandarin, you can take language courses at Yale College. If you're interested in learning about leadership from General Stanley McChrystal, he teaches a course at the Jackson Institute for Global Affairs. If you're interested in shoring up your presentation skills, one of the most popular classes for Yale SOM students outside the School of Management is actually a course in visual storytelling at the world-renowned Yale School of Drama. Yale University is truly your oyster in that respect. And the majority of our students will take at least one class outside of SOM during the time they're here. Many will take more than that. About 15% of our students are actually pursuing joint degrees during the time they're at SOM, and that can be with the medical school, the law school, school of forestry, public health, and so on. And if you're one of those students pursuing a joint degree, that's fantastic. And if you're sitting next to one of those students in your classroom, that's fantastic too, because that means you're learning alongside someone who's thinking deeply about a different subject matter, and that's only going to add to the richness of the classroom conversation. There's so many ways to connect across Yale outside of the classroom as well, from student-run conferences that span schools, such as the healthcare conference, which is run every year. There are myriad speakers that come to campus each year that you have access to. You can start businesses with faculty members or students from across the university through the Sci Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale. Again, so many different points of connection. And all of this is really meant to enhance your understanding as a business leader, to be able to draw from a vast array of disciplines in solving complex challenges that you'll face. And in thinking about the application, we're looking for people who are open to this type of experience, who are intellectually curious, who have shown evidence of wanting to integrate different disciplines in the past and being open-minded in their approach to learning. Moving on to the next objective, to be the most distinctively global U.S. business school. Most business schools today incorporate some sort of global component, and this often looks like a partnership with an international business school. Rather than take this somewhat narrow approach, 6 years ago, Yale SOM took the lead in establishing what we call the Global Network for Advanced Management, which really cracked open the opportunity for innovation in the global management space. So the Global Network for Advanced Management is a partnership of 30 schools across 5 continents that gives you access to students, faculty, and staff in pretty much every major market across the globe. A lot of innovations have come out of this network over the last several years. One of my favorites is, I'll tell you a little bit about, is our Global Network Weeks. So they happen twice a year, and so this past March, nearly 700 students gathered on one of 17 different campuses to learn in a truly global classroom in an area of that region or that school's particular expertise. So for instance, if you traveled to the Technion in Israel, you learned about why that country is considered to be the startup nation. If you traveled to Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, you learned about the fintech revolution going on in Hong Kong, and so on. And that's just one of the options for engaging globally that's coming out of the Global Network. I'm not going to go into all of the detail here, but we do have a global studies requirement, and many of the options for fulfilling that requirement are really fueled by the Global Network. Everything from travel opportunities, through courses, through more hands-on experiential opportunities, all the way through a semester-long exchange program. As you all sit in your homes and places of work across the globe, I probably don't need to convince many of you why a global management education is so important. But even if you do plan on staying in your home region for the bulk of your career, inevitably you're going to be interacting with global customers or investing in global markets, working on global teams. Business is inherently global now. And then thinking about how this plays into the application process, I do want to underscore, you don't necessarily have had global experiences to date. That's not specifically what we're looking for. It is helpful, though, to be open to these sorts of experiences, to be eager to engage with people different from yourselves. And this is the sort of thing that we are thinking about in selecting community members. So moving on to the final objective, to be recognized as the best source of elevated leaders for all sectors and regions. This is the objective that in some ways I think is hardest to quantify, but it definitely strikes at the very core of our mission and who we are as a school. So hopefully you're getting a sense of how important connectedness is to our mission, whether it's being connected across campus, whether it's being connected globally. Our unique integrated curriculum is yet another connective force, and one that enables you to take on complex challenges by applying different lenses, different perspectives, really connecting the dots in ways that matter. I think in talking about how our approach is so different, it is helpful to think for a moment about how most traditional business school curricula were developed. So they were developed sometime in the 1970s around the traditional academic silos that exist within a university, so things like finance, marketing, accounting, and so on. And this approach was largely okay because most post-MBA jobs were fairly function-specific, and you go on progressing sort of within a single function for the bulk of your career. And so this approach really matched what the post-MBA landscape looked like. Times have definitely changed, and we as a school have recognized that and have really sought to evolve our curriculum in a way that reflects that. So the courses at the core of our integrated curriculum are called the organizational perspectives because they look at how organizations work from the perspective of different stakeholders, such as the investor, the customer, the innovator, the competitor, and so on. In addition, the courses approach organizational challenges by pulling from multiple academic disciplines at once, and again, giving you a much more connected view of the challenges you'll be taking on. So I think the core course Sourcing and Managing Funds is a good example of this. It is co-taught by different professors, bringing in those different perspectives. And it pulls from multiple disciplines, from finance, from strategy, from operations and accounting. all of the organizational perspectives courses are meant to work seamlessly together. And so that requires our professors to work across academic departments in order to coordinate that. You'll often study the same case from multiple organizational perspectives courses, again, to get a more well-rounded view of the challenges that you'll be taking on. It's definitely a more rigorous approach, I think, for both our students and our faculty. It's not typical for faculty members to work together in this way, but I think you'll agree it's much more representative of the way that you'll encounter challenges in the real world, where they're rarely bucketed into a single academic discipline, but instead you need to be able to think across boundaries. And again, linking it back to our application process, we are looking for people who are open to this type of experience, who are excited to learn in this way, and has shown evidence of this kind of intellectual curiosity and a desire to pull from a lot of different ways of thinking in order to solve problems. So before we move on to the application itself, I do want to touch for a moment on our community. So I focused mostly on kind of the academic side of the experience, but obviously a big piece of your business school experience is engaging in the culture and the community of the university. And as an alum of the school, I can say it has been just an honor and a privilege to be a part of this community and to engage with it in so many different ways. It strikes me as a community of talented and ambitious, yet inherently collaborative individuals who really want to learn from one another. And I think it takes a special sort of person to really want to engage in that type of environment. One phrase that I've heard used that has always stuck with me is it's a community of people with soft elbows. So people who challenge one another, who are interested in challenging one another, but always in a way that's respectful and with the idea of getting towards mutual understanding and expanding one's own point of view. The best way to get to know our community is to engage with members of it. So I encourage all of you to reach out to an admissions ambassador, reach out to a club representative, and most importantly, if you can, come to campus. Our academic year campus visit program will begin September 4th, so we'd love to welcome you here and give you an opportunity to engage with some more of our community members on the ground. So moving on to the good stuff, the application. So my colleagues here will be going through some of the individual components of the application, which you see here, but I'll also tee up some of our upcoming deadlines. So you'll see the first deadline, round one deadline, is just over a month and a half from now on September 12th. We get the question a lot, what is the best round in which to apply? And the answer is it's when your application is most ready, when it's in its best shape. Your individual odds of being admitted in round one versus round two are the same, so make sure your application is really where you want it to be. Round three is a little bit more challenging. There's fewer spots available. There's less scholarship funding available. It ends up being the right choice for some, but if you can put your application together and get it into a good place by round one or round two, that's probably the best case scenario. Another question we tend to get a lot is what is it that you're looking for? What do I need to get into the Yale School of Management? And I want to emphasize that there's no golden ticket. There's no one special secret thing that we're looking for that is kind of key to the whole application process. We try to be very transparent about what we're looking for in our application, and so I'll try to do that now in kind of straightforward terms. We're looking for people who are academically prepared, so it is a rigorous program. We want to set people up for success, and we want to bring people in who are really going to be rewarded by the unique approach that we have. And like I said, it rewards those who are intellectually curious and excited about a really interdisciplinary approach. We are looking for impact in your professional lives and beyond that. And so within that, we're looking for people who seek to make impact as a leader, but also as a collaborator. So we look for evidence of that within your application. And then finally, we're looking for people who are going to be engaged community members. We want you to engage during the time you're here at Yale SOM, but we're also looking for people who are going to engage in the teams and the organizations and the communities they are a part of thereafter. So at a high level, those are the things that we are looking for within your application, but I'm sure you're eager to hear a little bit more about the specific components and how they all come together. Again, it is a holistic review process. We're not looking at any one individual thing in isolation. It's really about how everything works together. So we'll get an opportunity to hear a little bit more from my colleagues about those individual components. So I'm going to pass things over to Jolene to get started with academic profile.
Thank you, Laurel. So I'm going to get started to talk a little bit about your academic profile, which is usually the first thing that people think about when they think about applying to a graduate education program. So as Laurel mentioned, we are taking a holistic approach to reviewing your application. So one piece of that puzzle is obviously your academic performance in the past, and reviewing that and looking through your academic performance is a way for us to gauge your potential for success in our rigorous classroom. That said, we are looking to go beyond your GPA. So we do look at the cumulative GPA, but we also are reading your transcripts in detail to go into the courses that you've taken, specifically any quantitative courses or any courses related to the more difficult aspects of management, such as finance and accounting. So we are going a little bit deeper than just looking at the final number that you graduated with. And obviously, in order to do that, we need all of your transcripts. So we want to see every course that you've taken for credit and the grade resulting from it. That means that if you did study abroad and those study abroad credits came back on your transcript with a grade of T for transfer or P for pass, we are going to ask you to go back to that university that you studied at abroad and find your transcripts so that we can see the actual grades that you earned in those courses. And finally, just because we are reading your transcripts kind of line by line, we are looking for you to present transcripts that are in English. So if your transcript is in another language, we ask you to have that officially translated, and we want to see the original as well as the translated copy that you had made. In addition to every course that you've taken, we also require a GMAT or a GRE. We accept either. We honestly do not care which test you've taken, but it is important, and it's an important part of our process. That said, it is just one data point, just like all of the other data points we're asking for. So we're not looking for a minimum GMAT or a minimum GRE, but we are looking for it in the context of the your broader profile and all of the data points that we have to suggest how successful you're going to be in the classroom if you come to Yale. We don't require an English test. We assess your English ability if you are a non-native speaker through the GMAT or the GRE and through the video questions and a variety of other tools that we use throughout the evaluation process, which my colleagues will talk about. So we don't require any additional tests other than one GRE or GMAT score. We definitely encourage you, though, to study for the exam. We feel like preparation and study is just as much of an indicator for your success as the actual score on paper. So definitely take some time to look through what the test kind of encompasses and make sure that you're well prepared for that test. If you do decide to take your GMAT or GRE a second time, we certainly encourage you to submit multiple scores. We're definitely looking for you to see how you've progressed through time, maybe for preparing more for the GMAT resulted in a higher score. But at the same time, we're looking at usually your highest score when we evaluate your application. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about the essay. So we have one essay question that we require you to answer, and that is asking you to describe the biggest commitment that you have ever made. And this essay question was actually developed in collaboration with one of our organizational behavior professors, Amy Rosniski. And in asking the question, we're really looking at your ability and how you approach making commitments and how you approach working through those commitments that you have made. So we realize that business school and your career path afterwards will require quite a few different kinds of commitments, and we want to kind of gauge your past behavior in that specific area as an indicator for future success there. So we want you to choose a commitment. We really don't mind what you choose as long as it's a reflection of who you are. It can be very expansive. It can also be very specific. But we're most interested in your behavior, so how you approach that commitment and how you moved through what it was that you made a commitment for. we want you to be genuine. We want you to describe something that was distinctive in your life and with your own voice. So some kind of tips towards that is remember to proofread. Remember to look through your essay and make sure that everything is correct, that there are no spelling errors or glaring typos. A common suggestion that I think is really, really helpful is to choose a relative or a friend who doesn't know what the essay question is for our school, have them read it and ask that relative or friend to tell you what they think the question is. That's a really good test to see if you are actually answering the question or if you're trying to tell us something that you might really care about but isn't really pertinent to the question and the attributes that we're looking to find through the essay. Finally, we also have a few other areas for you to give us additional essays or answer additional questions. So the first is for reapplicants. We give you a little bit of space to describe what has changed since your first application. And we also give you a little bit of space for an optional statement. And this should really be you should really use the optional space to tell us anything else that you think we should know. So you don't want to leave us kind of asking questions about something if you feel like you can explain it. So kind of a really obvious example of this would be if you have a gap in your work experience, kind of explaining what you did during that time is a really good idea. We realize that life happens. We realize that there are reasons for you to take a gap in your professional experience. That's certainly fine. But we want to know what happened there so that we're not kind of filling in the gaps in our imagination instead. And with that, I'd like to turn it over for recommendations to Maria.
Thank you. Okay, so you're required to submit 2 professional letters of recommendation from direct supervisors. Ideally, one should come from a former and one from a current supervisor. Of course, we understand that not all of you would be able to provide one from a current supervisor. Perhaps you're not quite ready to approach your manager and share with them that you have decided to pursue an MBA and will be leaving your job soon. So, of course, in that case, it's okay to approach a former supervisor and perhaps a manager from your current place of employment that is not somebody that you directly report to. Just make sure to tell us about it in the optional essay. Now, take time to speak with them well in advance, especially former supervisors that you may not have seen or spoken to in a while. Make sure to provide an updated copy of your resume. Tell them a little bit about your motivation to pursue an MBA, what you're hoping to accomplish academically and professionally after graduation. Make sure to get them fully up to speed. Give them plenty of time to work on the letters of recommendation. I would say at least 5 to 6 weeks, minimum a month. I'm sure that all of you would be approaching very, very busy professionals, so it's only fair that you give them enough time to work on the letters. Do not hesitate to send them gentle reminders about the letters, and you will know once they have submitted the letter because you will receive an electronic notification from us. Okay, last but not least, please do not provide any kind of draft to your recommender, even if they ask for it, whether it comes in the form of paragraphs or a draft of the letter itself. Please make sure to explain to them that it's against our process, against our policy, and if they don't have the time to write you a letter, please make sure to approach somebody else. Okay, so a few words about the resume and your work experience. We really expect to see a one-page resume. So please make sure to fit all of your experiences and accomplishments in one page. Make sure to remove objective and references. The bulk of your resume should focus on your academic background and your professional experiences. Of course, feel free to include other information that you feel is relevant and would be helpful to the committee, such as volunteer activities, community service, and so on. Of course, the resume should be presented clearly, should be formatted clearly and free of errors and inconsistencies. So make sure to go over the language, check the dates, ask a friend or colleague to help proofread it, making sure that the information that gets to the committee is correct and presented correctly. If you work for a small company, organization, NGO, have your own venture, and it's a really small one that we may not have heard about, please make sure to include a parenthetical description of that entity, just to make sure that you convey to the committee a little bit more about the nature, the scope, the industry, the size of that entity. It is tremendously helpful to us in committee. And finally, make sure to both quantify and qualify your experiences. So in terms of qualifying your professional experiences, make sure to tell us really about your specific role, your duties, your responsibilities, meaning that we're not really looking for a generic job description that came with the role when you applied for it, but something really tailored to your experiences in that role. And obviously your accomplishments and your impact. And obviously in quantifying those experiences, make sure to include numbers, percentages, dollar signs, etc., that really help us understand the value that you added, as well as the impact that you had in that particular role. Okay. And finally, I mentioned this. Please feel free to include activities, whether they're from community service, volunteer activities, whether they're from the past or current. That is, again, useful information for the committee to know, especially if it's something that you're dedicating a significant amount of time to outside of your job.
Thanks, Maria. So the last step in submitting your application to the Yale School of Management is to complete your video questions. And while this can be extremely intimidating, and you may have convinced yourself that you're going to look like this, first, I can assure you that you're not. And also, we think you'll find it to be a really unique opportunity to just create a more dynamic profile. As Jolene mentioned, the video questions were developed to replace a test of English language proficiency. So that's why we no longer require students to submit a TOEFL or IELTS exam. And it's really just a great way to get to know you a little bit better beyond your physical application. In regards to the timeline of the video questions, they will be made available to you after you submit your application and pay your application fee. So without further ado, what are the video questions? They are 3 randomized, previously recorded questions asked by an admission team member. So remember, they are random, so no 2 applicants will receive the same set of questions. The questions themselves will resemble pretty standard interview questions that you can expect in any interview setting. And they're not brain teasers, they're not riddles, they're not meant to stump you. You will have 20 to 30 seconds to gather your thoughts and 60 to 90 seconds to deliver a response. So let's just break that down just a little bit further. So for the first 2 questions, you'll receive 20 seconds to gather your thoughts and 60 seconds to actually answer the question once it's been asked. And then you will have, for the third question, 30 seconds to gather your thoughts and 90 seconds to deliver your response. If you find yourself completing your answer with time remaining, don't feel like you need to fill that time. You can certainly end the recording once you have completed the question. So just a few tips in completing your video questions. And I think this is one that students may overlook. Become familiar with the response time frame. So 60 to 90 seconds can feel like no time at all, and it can feel like an eternity. So get comfortable with practicing some basic interview questions in that given time frame. You can practice by using Skype, so we recommend Skyping with a friend and having them turn off the video portion of their Skype so that you can answer some questions while not actually receiving any verbal cues from somebody sitting on the other end. Can't stress this enough. Use the practice tool. You actually are given a practice question before you officially start recording your answers. So use this tool to get familiar with the platform and also just to check your camera setting and the angle and make sure that your microphone is working properly. And lastly, find a good internet connection in a quiet, private space. There's nothing more frustrating than if you're trying to complete these questions and your internet keeps cutting in and out. And similarly, you don't want your roommate barging in on you while you're trying to complete these video questions. So make sure that you have a nice private space to complete these. If you want some more tips, I definitely recommend checking out our Assistant Dean for Admission, Bruce Delmonico's most recent blog post on our website. So to be very clear, the video questions do not take the place of your interview. They are simply a component of your application. And the interviews are extended, the offers are extended by invitation, and those can come at any point throughout the round in which you apply. So they can come after the application deadline throughout up until the decision release date. If you do receive an interview invitation, know that you'll be invited to campus for a 30-minute interview that is surrounded by a really nice day of programming. And it's a nice way for you to get to know the SOM community, get to know our staff members, our faculty members, and obviously our students as well. And obviously, it's also designed for us to get to know you a bit better. And don't worry if you can't make it to campus and you're offered an interview. We do complete interviews via Skype as well as in various cities throughout the world. So interviews are blind, so your interviewer will have only seen your resume. So as Maria mentioned, anything on your resume is pretty fair game, so make sure that you can speak to each of the impacts that you've listed on your resume, and also maybe any of the activities you've listed on your resume as well. Always remember the basics, always comes back to the basics. Be on time, dress professionally, and come prepared. So even if you're conducting an interview via Skype, dress professionally. I always feel that you're putting your best foot forward when you feel professionally dressed and ready to go. Similarly, if you come to campus, know that all of your interactions that day are going to be part of the evaluation process. If you're meeting any staff or faculty or students, be kind and, leave them with the best impression of you. Have intelligent questions for your interviewer beyond maybe impressing them with the questions that you've come up with. This will really lead to a better conversation with your interviewer, and you'll leave the day feeling like you know how you fit into the SOM community a little bit better. So try and come up with some questions that can't be answered by just scanning the website for a few minutes. And also follow up. So aside from just sending a follow-up thank you to your interviewer, there's a good amount of time that may pass between your interview date and the decision release date. It could be up to a few weeks. So it doesn't have to be complete silence from us. So reach out to us, either our admission ambassadors, as Laurel mentioned, or your interviewer, or any of us as well are happy to answer any questions that you may have after that date. Without further ado, hand it over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Katie. So pursuing your MBA is both a significant investment in terms of time and money. We believe the return on investment is also significant personally and professionally, but I wanted to spend a few minutes walking you through some of the ways in which you can prepare financially for this large investment. Not only in terms of the pre-MBA preparation, but also some of the ways in which Yale SOM can help you after you graduate as well as part of our lifelong commitment to you as an alumnus. So the first way in which you can think about preparing for an MBA, but is frankly largely out of your hands, is through money from Yale University itself in terms of grant aid. We do have some institutional funding. Roughly a third to a half of our admitted students are provided with a scholarship. It is just one additional cut, frankly. How we do that is we let you know at the time of admission whether you are going to be the recipient of a merit-based scholarship. We don't offer need-based funding here at Yale SOM, as do many of our peer schools as well. All international students are equally as eligible and receive merit-based scholarships. And again, that does come at the time of admission. Another great source of things to think about and source of funding, frankly, and this is where you can really start preparing for your MBA, is through gathering facts on outside scholarships and sources of funds. Many employers will offer some funding. Sometimes you have to ask. Sometimes that's not appropriate. Many governments offer some kind of funding. A great example that we'll talk about in a minute is the Veterans Affairs Department here in the United States. But there's also other organizations like the Consortium or the Forte Foundation, or who knew that there's a U.S. government financial association that provides scholarships to people who want to go into public finance. Do your legwork, do your homework. As much as I can help you, I have by providing this information on Affording Your MBA section of our website. So please scan and look if there's anything relevant for you. And that is a great way to start preparing pre-MBA and some legwork that you can do. While you're here, many of our students, in fact, the majority of our students will take on a level of debt through loan programs. We participate in federal loan programs for our American students or for permanent residents. For our international students, we actually are very proud to have 2 different options that don't require U.S. guarantors. And you're able to borrow up to the cost of, or 80% of the cost of attendance, which is both tuition and fees and living expenses. So for our international students on the webinar today, please make sure you do prepare financially for that 20% not covered by loans if that is your plan for financing your MBA. Now let's turn our attention a little bit to how we help our graduates pursue the careers that really speak to them and how they're able to afford those careers. So for our alums going into the nonprofit or government sector, whether that be here in the United States or anywhere in the world, we do have a program in which we take the need-based loans that you took in order to attend, and we help you repay those post-graduation, based on your income when you graduate. The idea here being to help increase your income, if you will, and still allow you to go and work in the public sector where salaries may not be as high. I'm going to skip the next point for right now. I'll come back in a minute. But another great post-graduation opportunity we have is around our entrepreneurial fellowships. 5 people are chosen by a committee, essentially, to pursue for 1 to 2 years post-graduation from their MBA program here at Yale SOM, their entrepreneurial idea. The idea here is to really give them the full resources of Yale University, and Sci-City is a great example of that, and while allowing them, if they have loans, to not incur additional debt. So we'll pay off the interest that's accruing on your loans for you while you're an entrepreneurial fellow. We also on the front end have 2 scholarships, merit-based scholarships devoted just to those who have a compelling entrepreneurial idea that we see in your application. The last point that I skipped briefly is that we are very proud to be a U.S. military-friendly school. And we have fee waivers for our U.S. military veterans and active duty service people. We also participate in the Yellow Ribbon Program and have a $20,000 a year match. This means for those of you who are U.S. veterans and are 100% eligible for the post 9/11 GI Bill, that you essentially get a free MBA, or at least the entire thing will cost you less than $10,000. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Laurel and answer some of your questions.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We have a number of good questions teed up already, so I'll just get started on those, and I will try to direct them to an individual team member, but feel free to chime in if you see fit. So I'm going to start off with Jolene, kind of 2 questions that are a little bit interrelated. The first is, will I be at a disadvantage if I didn't study business in undergrad? And related to that in a way, if you don't have quantitative courses on your transcript, how can you prove your ability quantitatively aside from a test score?
Sure. So those are both really great questions. So first of all, we are looking to build a diverse classroom with a diverse number of voices. So we do admit people from all different academic backgrounds, everything from dance and art to engineering. So definitely we're not if you have a business degree as your bachelor's, that's great. If you don't, that's great as well. We definitely want to learn about you and review your application. The second part of that question was about the test score.
was about how you can prove your quantitative ability aside from the test score, obviously.
Yeah. So obviously we are looking to make sure that you'll be able to succeed in the statistics and accounting and finance courses that you'll have during your time here at Yale. If you don't have a lot of quantitative score, that does mean that we have only the quantitative score of your test in order to make that sort of assessment, but there are a variety of ways that you can kind of help us. So if you do have time, for example, to take an evening class in microeconomics or accounting, that would definitely help, and you're definitely allowed to submit your grade and performance in that class as a way to show your abilities. Oftentimes we see people with work experience that have a quantitative nature, even though they have a degree in literature or something non-quantitative. That also helps us to assess your quantitative abilities. So there's a variety of ways that you can show that you're ready to hit the ground running in those courses without necessarily having a full major in a quantitative field. Are you missing anything?
No, I think that's it. Thank you. This one I'm going to direct towards Maria. So we have a question: how do you apply for a joint degree program and when?
Fantastic question. Thank you. So you're welcome to apply to a joint degree program from the outside, meaning from outside of Yale if you're not a current Yale graduate student. And the way you apply to the joint degree program is you apply to both schools separately. We have 2 separate applications, deadlines, requirements, and processes. Okay, so you obviously have to be admitted by both programs, to the joint degree program. However, if you're only admitted to one, you can still come to Yale, and within your first year here, you can apply, reapply to the other program, so you have one more chance to be a joint degree student. Should I go into any specifics? Of course, it works a little bit differently for each program. Some programs are longer, as in 4 or 5 years. The joint MBA PhD program is 7 to 8 years, so obviously you have more than one chance to reapply. But most degrees end up being a 3-year program when you combine 2 separate master's programs. So these are the only 2 options to apply from the outside or from within Yale during your first year at Yale University.
Great. I'm going to send another population-specific question your way, Maria. So if you want to speak very briefly about the Silver Scholars Program, and then specifically, if you are a Silver Scholar applicant, who should you ask for a recommendation?
Great. So the application is essentially the same. The only difference is in the letters of recommendation. Young professionals, as I mentioned earlier, are required to submit 2 professional letters of recommendation from direct supervisors. Silver Scholars are required to complete 1 professional and 1 academic recommendation. Academic means from a professor, a dean, academic advisor, somebody that can actually speak to your academic performance, and so on. And the professional one should come from a supervisor, somebody that oversaw your work during a summer or winter internship, or even on campus. Maybe you're a researcher, or worked in a lab, or participated in a student organization, and that supervisor can definitely provide that letter. Anything generally about the program?
Any other differences in the application process that are worth noting?
Yeah, I would say that perhaps one of the most important things that we look for in a Silver Scholar applicant is clarity of professional goals, because obviously the young professionals have had a chance to work for a while, get a sense of what they like, what they don't like, where they see themselves professionally, do they want to change careers or advance in their current career. With Silver Scholars, applying as college seniors, we already expect them to be at that point where they know which professional career they want to embrace, and they want to use the MBA degree as a career accelerator. So it's incredibly important to demonstrate that to the committee, obviously tied to your academic studies and the various internships that you've done, but make sure that you present a clear vision of where you want to go professionally. Again, because of the limited work experience that Silver Scholars come with, we place a bit of a stronger emphasis on academics. That doesn't mean that we expect a 4.0 from everyone. It's just that we do expect to see a solid academic record, and also we hope to see that you have been able to challenge yourself intellectually while in college.
Great, thank you. I'm going to send this one Rebecca's way. For the essay, are you looking for a personal or professional commitment? Is one preferred or more relevant?
That's a great question, a question we get a lot as we meet applicants, both here on campus and throughout our travels. And the answer is it has to answer the question whatever way speaks to you. So we don't actually have a preference. We've seen great professional commitments. We've seen a mix. We've seen great personal connections. They can be both, commitments, excuse me. They can be finite commitments with details, or they can be very expansive, sort of more thematic commitments with details. What we're really looking for here is a sense of your discipline in attacking this, your sense of true commitment, and to get a better sense of who you are and what makes you tick. And so the only real wrong way to answer this commitment question is by essentially giving a prose format version of the essay of the resume that you have already submitted. And so that is not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will not be admitted to the MBA program, but it's certainly not additive information to put your resume in prose format.
Great. This next one is for Kate. Can you touch upon who conducts the interviews depending on where and how you're interviewing?
That's a great question. So if you're coming to campus to interview, most likely you will be interviewed by a second-year interviewer, so a second-year student. If you are interviewing off campus, like I said, in various cities across the world, you will most likely be interviewing with an admission committee member at that point. And if you are interviewing via Skype, it could be either one. So you may be interviewing with a second-year student, or you may have an admission committee member that has stepped in as well. If you are a Silver Scholar, that is kind of where the differentiator is. So if you're a Silver Scholar, you will always be interviewed by a Silver Scholar admission committee member. You will not be interviewed by a student if you are a Silver Scholar.
Great. Jolene, do international students need a WES evaluation of their transcripts or just a translation?
So we do require a certified translation, so we want to see that it has been kind of officiated, but we don't necessarily need to see the WES certificate alongside that. We do our own verification process after you are admitted, if you are admitted, and at that point we do work with every school you've attended to verify the information that we see on your transcripts.
Great. Another one for you, Jolene. How does the committee review the IR and AWA portions of the GMAT?
Yeah, so it is, again, just one data point in the holistic approach that we are taking to your application. We have lots of other data points about your writing ability, so that does come into play with your AWA, and the IR is, again, a way for us to see how you think logically. Since it is a newer portion of the test, we are working through how best to put that into our evaluation process. But we are looking at it. So if it is like a 0 or a 1 because you just waved it away, we will definitely notice that as well. So definitely do your best, kind of help us to improve our evaluation process and figure out how best to integrate that into our evaluation.
Great, thank you. Maria, I have a couple of questions around work experience. So the first is it okay to have a gap in my work experience, and what's the best way to communicate that?
Yeah, so we actually asked that question on the application, and we are only asking for clarification around it if the gap is more than 6 months. Okay, so many young professionals have a gap. It could be a month, a couple of months. You do not need to worry about it or address it in any way. Again, only if it's over 6 months.
Okay. Okay. I believe we do also ask if you are currently not working to give us some more detail around that as well. Is it necessarily a deal breaker if you have a gap or if you're currently not working?
It's definitely not a deal breaker. We understand that people have many different circumstances in life. We're just obviously looking to better understand the reason behind it and what you're currently working on, if you're currently employed. So we're just asking for more context.
Okay. Another work experience related question. So how much does work experience weigh into evaluation, especially for someone who is more early career, say perhaps with 2 to 3 years of work experience?
Yeah. So again, I think we've said this already a number of times. We review applications very holistically. So this is one data point. Sometimes early career applicants worry, do I have enough work experience? It's really not about the number of years of work experience, but about the quality of the work experience, right? Which is why I would like to go back to what I said earlier about really offering the committee, detailed context around your current role in terms of the projects that you're working on, your duties, responsibilities, accomplishments, and impact. Right, because that really helps us understand the level of responsibility and what your work experience is really like. Focus on communicating that clearly to the committee and not just on the digit, right, the number of years of work experience.
Great. One more question on the work experience front, specifically about communicating your work experience in the resume. Do we have a specific format that we're looking for?
So we actually provide a template as part of our application that you are welcome to use. It's not a requirement, just a suggestion of how you could use that as a template to provide us all the necessary information that we require.
Okay, great. Kate, do you have to submit the video questions before the application deadline?
It's a great question. So if you are one of those people, nothing wrong with this, but you're waiting till 4:59 on the application due date to submit your application, that's okay. You can do that. You'll actually have a few days after you submit your application, or after the deadline to complete those video questions. So like I said, if you're applying on the deadline, you'll still have a few days afterwards to complete those video questions. And like I mentioned before, they won't appear for you. They won't be available to you until you submit your application and pay your application fee. So make sure you get that done, and then you'll be able to submit those a few days later.
Great. So I'm going to put this one out to Rebecca. How does Yale SOM approach ensuring diversity? Are there limitations or quotas for specific geographic locations or industries?
That's a great question. We are certainly, I think we take a very, again, I'll use the word expansive approach to diversity. I mean, diversity is not just around where you're from or what you look like or what you do, but it's also around, do you play the banjo? Do you love to swim? And so we really do try and get a diversity and 340 people here every year who are going to bounce off each other in whatever way that looks like. We don't have quotas for how many people of X background we take or Y industry we take. I like to say we can only admit the people who apply. And I do think and I will be biased here, I think we self-select for applicants, hopefully like you, who are intellectually curious and broad-minded and choose to come to a community that is purposefully very diverse across all dimensions. Did I answer the questions well?
I think so, and I'll build on that with a kind of related question we have. So how does the committee review candidates with non-traditional work experience, like education? So that's in a way almost the reverse, if I see myself as different from most of the applicants. This is one of my favorite questions to get on the road, and one that I think we all get a lot. Someone will come up to us and say, I'm a non-traditional candidate, and then go into talking about why they're a non-traditional candidate. I think we all sort of chuckle to ourselves a little bit because almost everyone is a non-traditional candidate. Everyone brings their own perspective to the table, their own background, their own experiences. There really isn't one mold that we're trying to fit. It wouldn't be a very interesting place if everyone came in kind of looking the same and talking the same. And so, like any candidate, no matter what your background is, you're going to want to talk about the impact that you've been able to achieve in the organizations and the teams that you've been a part of, whatever industry or whatever that kind of professional community might look like for you. And I think that plays into the diversity expanding to to industry backgrounds and professional experiences as well. So let's see. This is sort of a broader question I'll put out to the group, if I can find it. I just lost it. What are characteristics you see in students who choose to attend SOM?
I think this is a very socially minded community. That's definitely one common thing we see across all applications. These are people that are obviously, can honestly say that our mission resonates with them. They're looking to contribute to the greater good, regardless of what professional path or company they choose after graduation.
I think people tend to be pretty globally minded as well, which again comes back to our mission of helping business and society. So I think the global requirement and the global nature of our business school really speaks to people who tend to come here, and they do want to kind of engage people from different cultures and regions and develop themselves to be globally minded.
I think that's another great piece that Laurel touched around earlier is our commitment to our global footprint, if you will. And one of the ways in which you feel that as an MBA student is that the Global Networks MBA graduates have the opportunity, if they're admitted, to attend a one-year program called a Master's in Advanced Management. And the result for that is, for all of you, is that they will sit in your electives. And all of a sudden now, a class that maybe, this changes every year because we don't have quotas, but let's say roughly 40% of you are international students, now becomes much closer to the American voices being around the 50% level. And it does change the context of the conversation as well. So again, I'd go back to my broad-minded, the willingness to learn from each other across lots of different spectrums.
Great, thank you for that. I think we have time for just one or two more questions. One question from an entrepreneur, and I'll put this one to Maria. Who's best suited to write my recommendations?
Right, great question. We understand that entrepreneurs will have to be a little bit more creative about whom they approach for a letter of recommendation. You are welcome to ask your business partner if you have one. You are welcome to approach other people, businesses, clients that you work with. Obviously, it's not okay to approach people that report to you or family members, but anybody else within that realm that you're closely working with and can speak to your, your abilities to, take on responsibility, work on projects, complete projects. You're welcome to approach them for a letter.
Great. I'll toss this one out to the group. I think anyone would be able to answer it. How does the committee view career changers?
Well, we kind of assume that you're looking to do an MBA, so you probably will be a career changer in some form or another. We realize that to change the country that you're working in and the industry and make a giant leap in responsibility is a pretty big task that is possible but relatively rare. But we do understand that taking 2 years off of your career and doing an MBA is your opportunity to review the industries that are available for you to go into, maybe take a pivot in your career or make a change from being that professional dancer to becoming a consultant. And that's perfectly, that's reasonable, and that's something that we are kind of aware is one of the big reasons for what an MBA is for.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining today. To my teammates, thank you to all of you for joining as well. I hope this is the beginning of a conversation and we'll continue to engage with you here at the school and on the road. Definitely encourage you to check out the events that we're having across the globe and come see us on the road or on campus. We'll also host a live student panel in the fall when our students are back on campus, so be on the lookout for that as well. And we are looking forward to hopefully reading your applications in the coming year. Certainly be in touch at mba.admissions@yale.edu with any follow-up questions. And thank you very much for joining today.